The Shape of Water by Andrea Camilleri, translated by Stephen Sartorelli, and read by Mark Meadows. Chapter 1. No light of daybreak filtered yet into the courtyard of Splendour, the company under government contract to collect trash in the town of Vigàta. A low, dense mass of clouds completely covered the sky, as though a great grey tarpaulin had been drawn from one corner to another. Not a single leaf fluttered. The sirocco was late to rise from its leaden sleep, yet people already struggled to exchange a few words. The foreman, before assigning the areas to be cleaned, announced that this day and for some days to come, Pepe Schemari and Caluzzo Brucoleri would be absent, excused from work. More than excused, they'd been arrested. The previous evening they'd attempted to rob a supermarket, weapons in hand. Two Pino Catalane and Saro Montaperto, young land surveyors, naturally without employment as land surveyors, but hired by Splendour as temporary ecological agents, thanks to the generous string-pulling of Chamber Deputy Cusumano, in whose electoral campaign the two had fought body and soul, and in that order, with the body doing far more than the soul felt like doing. The foreman assigned the jobs vacated by Pepe and Caluzzo, that is, the sector that went by the name of the Pasture, because, in a time now beyond memory, a goat-herd had apparently let his goats roam there. It was a broad tract of Mediterranean brush on the outskirts of town that stretched almost as far as the shore. Behind it lay the ruins of a large chemical works, inaugurated by the ubiquitous Deputy Cusumano, when it seemed the magnificent winds of progress were blowing strong. Soon, however, that breeze changed into the flimsiest of puffs, before dropping altogether, but in that brief time it had managed to do more damage than a tornado, leaving a shambles of compensation benefits and unemployment in its wake. To prevent the crowds of black and not-so-black Senegalese, Algerians, Tunisians and Libyans wandering about the city from nesting in that factory, a high wall had been built all around it, above which the old structures still soared, corroded by weather, neglect and sea salt, looking more and more like architectures designed by Gaudi under the influence of hallucinogens. Until recently the Pasture had represented, for those who at the time still went under the undignified name of garbage collectors, a cakewalk of a job. Amid the scraps of paper, plastic bags, cans of beer and Coca-Cola, and shit piles barely covered up or left out in the open air, now and then a used condom would appear, and it would set one thinking, provided one had the desire and imagination to do so, about the details of that encounter. For a good year now, however, the occasional condom had turned into an ocean, a carpet of condoms, ever since a certain minister with a dark, taciturn face worthy of a Lombroso diagram had fished deep into his mind, which was even darker and more mysterious than his face, and come up with an idea he thought would solve all the South's law and order problems. He had managed to sell this idea to a colleague of his who dealt with the army, and who, for his part, looked as if he had walked right out of a Pinocchio illustration, and together the two had decided to send a number of detachments to Sicily for the purpose of controlling the territory, to lighten the load of the carabinieri, local police, intelligence services, special operations teams, coast guard, the highway police, railway police and port police, the anti-mafia, anti-terrorism, anti-drug, anti-theft and anti-kidnapping commissions, and others, here omitted for the sake of brevity, quite busy with other business. Thanks to the brilliant idea of these two eminent statesmen, all the Piedmontese mama's boys and beardless Friulian conscripts, who just the night before had enjoyed the crisp fresh air of their mountains, suddenly found themselves painfully short of breath, huffing in their temporary lodgings, in towns that stood barely a yard above sea level, among people who spoke an incomprehensible dialect, consisting not so much of words as of silences, indecipherable movements of the eyebrows, imperceptible puckerings of the facial wrinkles. They adapted as best they could, thanks to their young age, and were given a helping hand by the residents of Vigàta themselves, who were moved to pity by the
Sample complete. Ready to continue?